guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at the new set on MTG Arena, and that is Alchemy Baldur's Gate. This is an adaptation from the paper set that came out a few weeks ago, the Commander Legends Baldur's Gate set. Unlike most formats that we get for Limited on MTG Arena, this one is not standard legal. So for those of you guys who like to play Limited to complete your sets, this is going to be slightly different and it might not be for you. Just like all the other Limited formats, you actually get to keep these cards, but again, they are not standard legal. They're only going to be legal in Brawl, Alchemy, and Historic. This is a Baldur's Gate set, so there are some reprints from the Forgotten Realms set, which is still legal standard, so if you don't have those and you're new to Magic, getting to play this will still help your collection overall. But for the most part, if you are looking to boost your collection and you're not interested in the digital-only formats, this isn't going to be for you. First, we're going to take a look at the markings on the cards, so that way you guys can tell whether a card is legal in standard or only in a digital format. Then we're going to take a look at some of the alchemy mechanics that have already been introduced to MTG Arena, but you guys might not be aware of because you've never played any of the alchemy formats before. So if you guys intend to play this format in Limited, you are going to need to know those alchemy mechanics. Then we're going to take a look at some of the new mechanics that are introduced with this new set. These new mechanics really utilize the digital-only format, so it's going to be a little bit crazy. We'll also take a look at some of the returning mechanics. And then the flavor abilities, which is pretty unique to the D&D set specifically, that we had a lot of in the Forgotten Realms. And then lastly, we'll just kind of touch briefly on the format itself. I haven't gotten to play it, but I will say as soon as I am done recording this video, I will be jumping over to the early access event, so that way the very next day I'll have some good content for you guys in the actual Limited format. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the cards themselves. So we've got this little circle wheel here for the set symbol. That is perfectly normal, a unique new set symbol. What we are seeing in the rarity silver marking at the bottom center of the card is the alchemy symbol. This is something that's kind of new. Normally this just symbolizes that this card is usually a rare in paper, so it's a way to protect magic cards from being proxied or counterfeited. But this little A symbol on the bottom right here basically says that this was a paper card that has been changed for alchemy specifically. And it does get a little confusing because there's also the alchemy in the top right that you'll see on the next card, which means something entirely different. So when you take a look at this card, it says double team. This was not on the original card. I believe this original card was also a 3/3 in the Commander Legends paper version. So yeah, that bottom right symbol there just means that this same art, same name, was a card already, but changed particularly for this set. That's a bit different from our ghoul here, who was originally printed in the D&D Forgotten Realms set. So this is just the regular version as is. So the way it works when you draft these, anytime you draft an alchemy card, is that if you draft this card, you will be getting to play with the other version that you'll see next, but you'll also have access to this version because it's been changed. So now you see not only the bottom right symbol, but you also see an A at the top of the name. So the one on the bottom right there means that it was originally a paper card that has been changed for alchemy. And then the A at the top left there shows that the card has actually not just been changed, but has been rebalanced. And this card, for example, got an extra toughness from the original printing. Bottom center means it's a reprint. Top right means it's a rebalance. And of course, the reprinting doesn't necessarily mean reprinted exactly as was, but more so that it has been changed. All right, let's go ahead and move on to some of the mechanics. Again, most of you guys, if you know Alchemy and Historic already, even Brawl, you guys will know most of these. But let's go ahead and jump in. The keyword perpetual is a thing that's kind of new. We've seen it in the last few Alchemy sets. This is just meaning that the card is always changed for the remainder of the entire game. So for the example of the sewer rats here, the card perpetually gets -2, -2, and it gets at the beginning of each upkeep, it perpetually gets -1, -1, so it gets worse and worse. So now the word perpetual, where this comes into play is if, let's say, the creature dies and I was able to somehow recur it, it would automatically come back into play with a -2 still on the creature. This has caused some like looping triggers and some silliness. It's definitely a really cool mechanic and not something you can easily do in paper because it would be tough to remember which card actually got it. For example, if I had 2 Llanowar elves, which one always comes back into play and automatically dies? you have to kind of be able to pay attention to those. So it's a cool digital only mechanic, but not something you get to see in paper. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about Conjure. Here is one of the newer Conjure cards. It says, conjure a card of your choice from the spell book, which we'll talk about soon. So conjure just means you create a card out of thin air. And again, this is not something we can do in paper magic, where you can create a token, but you can't necessarily conjure a card for your hand. There's a reason why tokens don't actually get bounced back to hand, because you can't physically hold them, and it's also tough to remember. So the conjure mechanic just creates something that we didn't have before. The spell book is another thing that is not something we're used to having. We have wish boards for sideboard, where you can put 15 cards in your sideboard and wish for one of them. Spellbook is kind of like that. This card has its own sideboard. So when you do, you actually can go and get one of these gates out of their spellbook. And each card has a different spellbook of cards that they have access to. Key to the Archive is a recent printing of a very powerful spellbook card. So this is not something that's going to be going anywhere. And if you guys are new to Alchemy, get used to it. The last recurring alchemy mechanic that you guys need to be aware of is the ability Seek. Seek, this card says, seek 2 non-land cards, then put a card from your hand onto the bottom of your library. The way Seek works is it automatically randomizes your deck and pulls 2 things out of it, but without shuffling your deck. So let's say you've got 10 creatures in your deck, and it knows where each one of those creatures are in your deck, in what order. And let's say it rolls a d10, and then you pick that creature and automatically gives it to you without you having to search or shuffle. And it gives you no say, which is kind of a neat mechanic in that usually they restrict, get something that's 2 CMC or less, get something that's 2 CMC or higher, and it costs a lot or a little, depending on what the ability is. This is allowing them to design cards in a way that, you play a little bit of Russian roulette here, where it's like, okay, maybe you pay a medium amount and you get hit by getting a 1-drop, or you get a big dragon, and that's really cool, and you normally wouldn't have been able to search for that. I mentioned this at the beginning when I talked about this card here, is that Seek doesn't actually shuffle, which is really cool. So you're no longer searching your library for a land or a non-land or whatever, and then shuffling your library. You just get it. So if you have anything that's affecting the top of your library, or if you, want to brainstorm and put something back on top, and then you want to seek something, you still get to keep that card. The same thing goes for like a, Fable, the Fable land, right? That actually does shuffle your deck. So you can cast these things and get to keep your thing, versus a land where you might not want to, just to keep your library as is. All right, let's go ahead and talk about some of the new mechanics that are coming to the Alchemy set that we haven't seen before. I picked a pretty simple card here. This is Double Team. You see that little Alchemy symbol on the bottom there? That means the Soldiers of the Watch. They were a creature or a card with the same art in the last set. And this is, they basically changed it up. Everything is different. Everything from mana cost, ability, and power and toughness can all be changed, but they were given Double Team, which again is not something that was given to us in paper. So what Double Team is an ability that says whenever a Double Team creature attacks, you can conjure, which we just discussed, a duplicate of that card and put it into your hand. Both copies lose Double Team. So basically this is a 2-1 for 2 that gives you an additional copy of itself one time. Now, often when a card loses its ability in Arena, it kind of just grays out the text. And if it goes back to the graveyard, it goes back to normal. So that's kind of the neat thing here, is that it loses Double Team, but it doesn't perpetually lose Double Team. So if you're able to put it in your graveyard and recur it, you can then continue to loop and get more value out of these Double Team cards. 2 creatures for the price of 1. Moving on, we're going to go ahead and talk about the new specialization card. This was actually my preview card, Wilson the Bear. So this bear is a trample reacher for 2 with ward 2, all things we know and understand, but it is a specialized card. So for 4 mana, you discard a card with it, and then based on that card's color identity, Wilson turns into a unique bear according to the color of the spell you discarded. So once you've gone ahead and paid the 4 specialization cost, and then you discard a card, like I said, based on the color identity of that card, you get Wilson the bear here that gains lifelink if you discarded a white card, or a blue land or blue card, blue spell, you're going to get the subtle bear, which all has a different ability. This gives unblockable, and we have the black one, which gains menace. So Wilson the bear here is very customization oriented based on what your deck wants to be doing. And oftentimes if you have a 4 or 5 color deck, you can decide what you give Wilson based on your needs at the time, which is pretty interesting. Now, I will say every single card turning into a 6-sided card does make for a lot of text because Wilson the Bear has 5 different unique versions of himself that he can specialize into. But the nice thing about that is that most of the text on the back sides of these cards stay the same. They just add or take away specific abilities. So once you get the feel for a card, you don't necessarily need to memorize a ton. It's not like they are just vastly different cards. And those are the 2 major brand new mechanics that are being added for the Alchemy update of the Commander Legends Baldur's Gate. It is important to keep in mind that not all of the cards from the original Commander Legends set are here, and a lot of the ones that are changed, like Wilson here. So let's go ahead and move on to the last of the mechanics section of this video, and we're just going to talk about some of the returning stuff that mostly came from the D&D set. So the first thing is the adventure here. We picked a pretty simple card. Adventure, some of them are instants, some of them are sorceries. It's the left-hand side of the card. You cast them as is, and then the creature goes on an adventure. This is separate from your exile pile. It's in your hand, sort of like the foretell section on Arena. So you'll see your hand, you'll see your foretell section, you'll see your adventure section. You guys might remember Bone Crusher Giant was one of the most popular or powerful adventure cards, still seeing a ton of play in Eternal formats. So this is kind of a 2-for-1 here. You get to draw a card and scry for 2 mana, but then for a little bit of a higher cost, you get also the creature on the other side of it. So adventure is a very powerful mechanic because it does create a lot more value on a single piece of cardboard for your limited decks. Don't sleep on the adventures. The next one that we're going to talk about is the Roll20s. So there are some new Roll20s, but also Contact the Other Plane here is a reprint from the D&D set. This is just one of your generic draw spells that we love to play in limited. One of the common complaints of the Roll20 cards is that they are too random, that what you get is very swingy, but for the most part, like this card, I feel like the die roll is very toned down, which I actually really enjoy. It's sort of like a pass plus. Every single time you cast this card, you're going to be getting exactly what you wanted, but sometimes you just get that nice little bonus, which doesn't necessarily make or break the game. And I feel like they average together very, very nicely. I do know that in the last D&D set, there were some like fairies that allowed you to roll 2 instead of 1 and take the higher, which is sort of like rolling at advantage or disadvantage in D&D, which I thought was a beautiful flavor on top to the set, and I'm hoping we get to see more of that in this set. All right, the last returning mechanics we wanted to talk about, which is a little bit unique, are these italicized bonus abilities here. Now, there are a lot of them, and you don't actually have to remember them. Basically, what they did is they gave every single italicized character their own unique ability here, and this is Pack Tactics, which in D&D actually had a little bit more cards that actually had it, and it was a full-on ability, but this one here is just some D&D flavor. They all have something unique. So Pack Tactics does its own thing. We can talk about Natural Shelter, but it's only on this card, so you don't really need to worry about it. You can read each one of these abilities as their own. So unlike Menace or Ward, don't feel like you need to memorize exactly what Natural Shelter does because that's not going to be super relevant. All right, that's the last of our abilities and mechanics here in the new Baldur's Gate Alchemy set. So the last thing I wanted to touch on briefly, again, I have 0 experience with the set. I plan on going and recording some live gameplay here. We are going to be doing the streamer event on Twitch as soon as I'm done with this video, and I'll get some hands-on experience and get to post some videos for you guys tomorrow. But seeing how this is posted on the day of the release, I did want to just kind of touch briefly on some of the, mechanics and archetypes. Make sure you guys are taking a look at those multicolor cards. They are going to be your signposts, and a lot of them are very, very similar to the D&D set that we had previously. That set is still very much in standard, so you should be familiar with a lot of the cards. A lot of the uncommon payoffs, like the Moon Dancer in the life gain deck, are still very much around, so it should have some very similar drafting archetypes. for you guys to keep up with. Now, one of the things I did want to mention just to close out this video is that I did notice there are a few 3-color cards, which is kind of surprising because there are no dual lands in this format. There are some seek lands, which help you with some card advantage, but they aren't going to help you fix your deck. One of the things that there are some of, which not a ton, is still some treasure generation, but definitely a lot less than we've seen in the last few sets. Deadly Dispute is one. We also have Improvised Weaponry and Prosperous Innkeeper, which is a wonderful card on its own, but certainly not enough treasure generation to warrant some heavy 3-color decks like we've been drafting in Capenna. I'm really interested to see if these 3-color cards are worth the payoff in a format with very little fixing. Alright guys, that is the end of my Baldur's Gate introduction video for Alchemy. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you guys think of the format. I know Alchemy in general is not super popular, so, you know, try to keep your comments a little bit respectful. You know, some people do like these formats. And I'm looking forward to not drafting Capenna until, you know, Dominaria comes out, which isn't until September 9th, I believe. So if you guys aren't a fan of drafting this in Limited, that's totally fine. But just remember that a lot of us, you know, don't want to just keep playing Capenna for another 2 months. So I will see you guys in the next video with some amazing new draft content. I love you guys. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.